Ever get that feeling like you just have to be the best?
Yeah.
Like always pushing yourself towards perfection. Even if it means like sacrificing other stuff.
Yeah.
Well, today we are diving deep into the personality of someone who, well, really embodied that drive. Maybe like no other.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
We're talking about Joseph Haydn.
Ah, the father of the
You
symphony.
got it. But we're going beyond the music, beyond just, the genius.
Sounds good.
We're trying to understand, like, what really motivated the guy, like, deep down.
So how are we going to do that?
That's where things get interesting. We're using this framework called the Enneagram.
Oh, the Enneagram. Now, I know what some people think when they hear personality typing.
Right, totally.
But the Enneagram is, well, it's not really about labels. It's more about understanding the why.
The motivations behind our actions, right?
You got it. The why behind our actions. And specifically for this deep dive, we're going to explore Haydn as a self-preservation 3.
Okay, you're going to have to break that down for me. What does self-preservation 3 even mean? And, like, what does it tell us about Haydn?
All right. So picture this. The self-preservation 3 is someone who is just driven to be seen as, like, valuable, essential even.
Okay, I can see that.
They want to prove their worth through, being competent, achieving things.
Yeah.
And just a constant output of, well, stuff.
So it's all about security.
Yeah, security through success. And when you look at Haydn's life with this lens, it's kind of amazing how many things just click into place.
Right, like the guy was a composing machine. Over 100 symphonies, 80 string quartets, operas, masses. It's like he never, ever stopped working.
Exactly. He was prolific. Take, for example, the years between 1766 and 1790.
Okay.
Haydn was in his 30s and 40s then. He was serving as Kapellmeister for the, they were pretty wealthy, this Esterhazy family.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. And he wasn't just composing. He was like running the whole musical operation. The orchestra, the singers, the concerts. Imagine the pressure.
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot to handle.
It is. And yet, this is when he produced some of his most, innovative symphonies, like Symphony No. 45.
A Farewell Symphony.
That's the one. And it has this super dramatic ending where, get this, the musicians literally leave the stage one by one.
I love that one.
It was so clever, like almost a sneaky way to remind his patron, hey, maybe the orchestra needs a break.
So he's managing all these responsibilities.
Yeah.
But still finds ways to be creative. Even like rebellious in a way.
Right. And that drive to be useful, to be needed, that's, well, it's classic self-preservation 3, but it's more than just being busy,
Yeah. What else is there?
Remember, it's about control, too. Order and mastery, those are like sources of security for this time. Of not just working hard, they're carefully crafting their image and what they produce.
So Haydn wasn't just composing. He was building a reputation as like a master, someone you knew you could depend on.
Exactly.
For, consistent brilliance.
But we can't forget, Haydn was also a man of deep feelings. And those emotions, well, they found a way into his music.
Right. It wasn't all just cold calculation and ambition.
Yeah.
There was real passion in his work, for sure.
Absolutely.
Like, think about the string quartets, Opus 76.
Oh, I love those.
Me too. The intensity, the drama, the moments that are, like, almost heartbreaking. I mean, how could that not be connected to his own experiences somehow?
You're right. We can't know for sure, of course, what was in his heart when he composed. But his music, it's definitely a window into his soul. And if we can understand his core motivations, that deep need to be valuable, to be in control, then we can really start to appreciate the layers in his music and in his life, too.
It's like we're peeling back layers of history, right?
Yeah.
Going beyond just the facts and, like, getting a glimpse of the real person underneath.
Yeah.
So this whole Enneagram thing.
Yeah.
We're not trying to put Haydn in a box, are we?
No, not at all. It's about appreciating the complexity of people, how our personalities and art kind of intertwine. The Enneagram just helps us see the patterns, the motivations behind what we do, maybe even understand ourselves a little better along the way. But it's just one piece of the puzzle.
It's a starting point, right?
Yeah, starting point for a much deeper dive into Haydn's world. And speaking of exploring, we haven't even touched on all his groundbreaking musical innovations.
Right. And that's where we're headed next. Get ready for some serious father of moments.
I'm ready.
I can't wait. Let's unpack all those symphonies and string quartets when we get back.
All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Joseph Haydn.
Yeah, we've been, looking at his personality through that Enneagram lens.
We have.
But now it's time to actually talk about the music itself.
It's time for the music.
And Haydn's impact, I mean, it's huge, like monumental, on the development of Western music.
Oh, absolutely.
He's called the father of the symphony and the father of the string quartet all the time. But
Right.
his titles, they're impressive, sure.
Right.
But they don't really, capture the magic.
They don't.
So for those of us who maybe aren't, like, fluent in music theory,
Yeah.
can you explain why Haydn's compositions were so groundbreaking?
Okay, so one of his most significant innovations was this thing called thematic development.
Okay. Thematic
Instead of just, presenting melodies, he took those musical ideas and actually, transformed them throughout the whole piece.
Interesting.
Like, imagine taking a tiny seed,
Okay, gotta see.
and then from that seed, a whole forest grows.
Wow.
He would twist the melody, break it apart, put it back together in new ways.
Really playing with it.
Yeah, playing with it. It created this incredible sense of drama and momentum.
So it's not just playing a tune, it's like having a conversation with the music.
Exactly, like a conversation. He'd take these, think of it like a chef.
Okay, a chef.
A master chef, right?
Or, yeah.
Taking a simple ingredient and turning it into this, elaborate multi-course meal.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Haydn was a master of, musical flavors.
Musical flavors.
Adding spices, textures, unexpected turns, always keeping the listener engaged. And he did this in symphonies, of course, but also in string quartets.
Right. Those quartets are in much smaller setting.
Right.
More intimate.
Yeah, just 2 violins, viola, and a cello.
But he revolutionized that too.
Oh, he did. Before Haydn, string quartets were seen as, just entertainment, light and fluffy.
Really?
But Haydn, he saw the potential for, real depth. Complexity. He gave each instrument its own voice, made them talk to each other, creating these intricate tapestries of sound.
That's amazing. But, we were talking earlier about Haydn's need for control, for order.
Right.
But all this experimentation, the playfulness in his music,
Yeah.
that feels almost like the opposite, doesn't it?
It's interesting, right? But remember, his control wasn't about stifling creativity.
It was.
It was about mastering his craft so completely that he could then push the boundaries from within that mastery.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's like a tightrope walker.
Yeah.
Right, so skilled they can do backflips up there.
That's a great image.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's innovating within these forms, but he's also working within the constraints of his time, right?
He was.
Employed by the Esterhazy family for almost 30 years.
That's a long time.
Writing music specifically for them, didn't that limit his freedom?
Well, yes and no. Haydn was amazing at balancing those demands with his own artistic vision.
How so?
Think about the Farewell Symphony again.
Okay.
On the surface, it's a piece for, the fancy royal event.
Right.
But hidden inside, there's this subtle protest.
No way, really.
A plea for his musicians, for their well-being. He's using the music to communicate on different levels, satisfying his patron, but also injecting his personality, his wit.
Wow. That's incredible. So we've got this master innovator working within a system, pushing boundaries. But what about his influence on other composers?
Oh, huge influence.
Like Mozart and Beethoven.
Yeah, exactly. He mentored them.
And you can hear it in their music.
Absolutely.
Like how?
Well, Mozart, for example, was so inspired by Haydn's use of thematic development.
Right.
And counterpoint, imagine a tapestry.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
With all these threads woven together.
To make something complex and beautiful.
Yeah, that's counterpoint. And Haydn, he was a master weaver. Mozart learned from him and then took those techniques even further.
Wow, that's amazing. And what about Beethoven?
Beethoven, he was a little more rebellious.
He was.
And interestingly, at first, he found Haydn's teaching methods frustrating, but the core principles, the structure and form,
Those stuck with him.
it's like Haydn gave him the blueprint for a really solid musical building.
I like that.
And then Beethoven, well, he built his own skyscraper on top of it.
With his own style.
Exactly. His own unique flair.
So this whole lineage of musical genius, but here's a question I've always wondered. If Haydn was so innovative, so influential,
Yeah.
why isn't he as popular today as, say, Mozart or Beethoven?
That's a good question.
Like, you don't see Haydn t-shirts everywhere.
You don't. It's true. Part of it might be that Haydn's personality was, well, maybe less dramatic, less prone to those big, grand gestures compared to Mozart or Beethoven.
I see.
His music often focuses more on the exploration of musical ideas. on this intricate interplay of melodies and harmonies.
It's more subtle,
Yeah, it's like a beautiful puzzle box. You have to
uh,
put in a little more effort to unlock it.
but the rewards are
The
there.
rewards are huge for those who do.
So it's music for a more, like, active listener, someone who really wants to engage.
I think so.
I can get behind that.
And that's where the real joy of Haydn lies.
The joy of Haydn.
It unfolds with every listen. New layers, more beauty, more complexity. And once you've tasted that, it's hard to go back.
Okay, I'm convinced. I'm going to add more Haydn to my playlist, for sure. But before we just, like, lose ourselves in symphonies all night,
Right.
let's move on to part 3. We've talked about Haydn the professional. But what about the man behind the music?
That's a good question, and that's exactly where we're headed. We'll delve into Haydn's personal life, his relationships, his struggles. All of it, and how his music reflected his, well, the complexity of his human experience.
So we're back and ready to uncover more about Joseph Haydn.
We are.
We've explored the genius, the innovations, all the ways he shaped music.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm curious to, like, peek behind the curtain,
I get it.
get a glimpse of the man himself. What was he like?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Like, what were his relationships like? Give us the scoop.
Well, we've talked about how Haydn was a master of, like, image control, right?
Yeah.
Projecting that aura of, like, I've got it all together, success and all that.
Right. Total control.
But his personal life, it's actually a bit more complicated than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it seems Haydn, even with all the confidence, all the professional wins, he had his fair share of struggles too.
Interesting. It's like this tension between the public image and the private reality. That seems to be a theme with him, huh?
It does, doesn't it? We saw it in his music, how he'd push those boundaries but still within the limits of his patrons.
Right. Working within the system.
Exactly. And it seems like that same dynamic played out in his personal life too,
Like with his marriage.
especially with his marriage.
Tell me more.
So Haydn married Maria Anna Keller back in 1760,
Okay.
but by all accounts, it wasn't a happy marriage.
Really?
They couldn't have children, which was, a source of sadness for Haydn. And from what we know, they were just very different people, different temperaments, different interests.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that Maria Anna wasn't really into music at all.
That's right. And there's even that story about her using Haydn's manuscripts as, like, curl papers.
I've heard that too.
Whether it's true or not, it kind of shows how disconnected they were.
Right.
And it makes you think, what was that like for Haydn emotionally?
Yeah, how did that affect him?
This strained relationship, did it somehow fuel his creativity? Or was it just this constant, like, private source of sorrow?
It's hard to imagine, right? This brilliant composer creating all this deeply moving music
Yeah.
and then going home to, well, a marriage where he wasn't happy. Makes you wonder if some of that yearning, that melancholy you hear in his music,
Yeah.
if it was like a reflection of his own longing for connection,
Hmm.
the kind he maybe wasn't getting at home.
That's a really interesting thought, and it brings us back to the Enneagram. Remember how the self-preservation 3 is driven to be seen as valuable?
I don't know.
To project that image of success.
Totally.
So maybe Haydn's public persona, his dedication to his work, was partly a way of coping.
With the pain he was feeling privately.
Exactly. Like his music became this refuge, a place to express those deep emotions, maybe the ones he couldn't share in his personal life.
Yeah, maybe it was safer that way.
It's a good reminder, Even the most celebrated people, the ones who seem to have it all,
Yeah.
they're still human. They still feel those heartaches, the disappointments, just like the rest of us.
It really puts things into perspective. I find myself listening to his music differently now,
You too.
knowing there's this whole human story behind the notes, full of, well, both triumph and sadness.
Exactly. And that's the power of, exploring history in this way. It's not just about dates and facts. We're trying to understand the people.
Their motivations, their complexities, it makes
Yeah.
it so much richer.
It does.
So as we wrap up this Haydn deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
what do you hope listeners will take away from all this?
Well, I hope they gain a new appreciation for Haydn's genius, not just as a composer, but as a person. I hope they're inspired to, really listen to his music, go beyond the surface and discover all those layers of emotion, of experience. And maybe most importantly, I hope they remember, even the biggest names in history were, at the end of the day, human, with the same joys and sorrows, the same struggles and triumphs as all of us.
Beautifully said. That's a really powerful message, not just for listening to Haydn, but for life in general. Remembering that behind every achievement, every struggle, there's a human story waiting to be understood.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our Haydn journey. It's been great exploring his world with you.
It really has. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed it. Keep exploring the amazing world of Haydn's music. There's so much to discover.